of all, thanks for coming out tonight. I know there's a lot going on this time of the year, so I appreciate you taking a couple of hours to join us. How many in this room have turned an end grain lidded box? Not too many of you. Okay, we'll maybe focus a little bit more on the basics tonight, but hopefully those of you who have turned a box will pick up something as well. Tonight I'm going to be demonstrating how I turn an end grain lidded box, and I emphasize how I turn it because there are many, many different ways to do this. And I'm not saying that my way is the best way, but it works for me at this point in time. If you come back a year from now, my technique may change a little bit as my skills advance, but hopefully you'll pick up something. As we go through this, let's keep this as informal as possible. There is no such thing as a dumb question. If you've got a question, chances are 2 or 3 other people in the group have the same question. So just put up your hand or yell out the question, and I'll keep talking until we adjust the volume. Okay?
Same technical staff.
Okay. I do have a handout that covers everything that I'll be covering tonight. Talks about the materials, the tools, the techniques. To get a copy of that handout, all you have to do is send me an email at my email address, and I'll send you an electronic copy. And if you're interested in learning how to turn an end grain lidded box or perhaps enhance your skills, there are some other resources you might want to consider. There are a couple of books out there that really are excellent. The first is a book called Turning Boxes. It's written by Richard Raffin. You can buy these books either in this store, on the internet, or other stores. In this book, Raffin really gives a detailed step-by-step instruction as to how to turn a box. There's another book I'd recommend. It's by Chris Stott. The neat thing about this book is in the back of the book, he literally shows 50 different boxes, and he has line drawings for each one of them, line drawings to scale. So if you're interested in turning one of these boxes, you just bring your calipers out, put them on the page, transfer it to the wood. You don't even need a ruler. So it's very good from that perspective. There are a couple of things on the internet. Our own Mike Peace on his blogspot has a tutorial on how to turn lidded boxes, once again, step by step. It's easy to find. There's also a guy by the name of Michael Stafford, and Michael Stafford must live and breathe end grain lidded boxes. I don't know, but I mean, he's got a 32-page handout. It's on multiple sites on the internet, pictures, detailed steps. So between these 4 readings or handouts that I'm passing around, you ought to be able to find something that will help you figure out how to turn these boxes. If you're not a reader and you're more of an audio-visual person, there are some great DVDs out there. Ray Key has a whole series of DVDs on how to turn an end grain lidded box. Ray will also be in the area next week. He's demonstrating at 3 different clubs. He has an all-day workshop in Barnesville on Wednesday, and then he'll be up in Dalton that week at the symposium. So if you're really interested in this, Ray Key is a good guy to get to know. Raffin has a DVD out, and our own Ron Brown has a two DVD set out. So there are plenty of resources out there to help you turn lidded boxes.
Ray Key is also the turning judge at the fair.
That's right. Butch mentioned that Ray Key will be judging the entries at the Perry Fair. I'd forgotten about that. I would venture to guess that most of you in this room, even if you've never turned an end grain lidded box, should be able to do it without a whole lot of difficulty. Number one, you probably already have the tools that you need. You need something to turn this round. A spindle roughing gouge. You need something to put a tenon on each end. You can either use a parting tool or a badan. You need something to hollow it with. And we'll talk about the different things you can use for that. So you really only need 3 or 4 tools to turn a lidded box, unless you're going to do something fancy like texturing or threading or something like that. You can see how much wood you need. It isn't like you go out and buy a whole tree's worth of wood. This is part of a baseball bat blank that I bought at Atlanta Hardwoods. You can turn it out of maple, cherry, walnut, Bradford pear, any wood like that, yes.
Best to use kiln dried.
It absolutely is. Well, it's best to use kiln dried if you want to be able to put the lid on or take the lid off.
Immediately.
Yes.
If you're patient,
Yeah.
it's fine, and it's
There-
like it's kiln dried.
There are some people who will tell you you can take a branch and rough turn it like a bowl and leave an inch thickness and then come back 6 months later and turn it the final size. But, you know, a piece of wood this size is not going to break the bank. So we should be able to do that. There are a number of different boxes you can turn. And let's just start with some basics.
Just set up a headstock. The camera is not tilting over.
That is the box we're going to be turning tonight. It's just a small piece of cherry. There's nothing fancy about it. It's got a top, or a lid, or a bottom, or a base. It's got a reasonable fit. You know, it doesn't fall off. I have been in your seats where people have passed boxes around, and I haven't been able to get the lids off. I guess there's a school of thought that thinks the tighter they are, the better they are. I don't subscribe to that, but that's the box we're going to be looking at tonight.
Or they fit it, and then they put finish on it after.
Well, that's why they have sandpaper. Now, if you're going to turn that box, there are different ways to embellish it. You can cut a recess in the top, and you can put a different color wood. You can put a darker wood, a lighter wood, a piece of box elder, a piece of spalted maple, ambrosia maple. You can put some inlace in. You can do what you want. There are a number of different things. If you want to build it up a little bit, you can put a finial on it. Now, that finial was just turned for this demonstration. It's not been finished, but so you can vary the top in terms of color. You can vary it in terms of height. You can do a number of different things. You can also embellish the interior. I think it's always kind of neat when you open a box and there's somewhat of a surprise. That is just a brass button off of an Army uniform, but you can put a piece of jewelry in there. Once again, you can put a wooden insert, you could put some inlace, whatever your mind imagines. And just as you might want to put a finial on the top, you can also put a finial on the inside, or maybe it's called an icicle on the inside. And once again, this was just turned for this demonstration, so it's not been finished. Now, these finials don't need to be real clunky like this one. They can be a little more elaborate. Now, that finial was not turned for this box, so it's not a tight fit, but you can have a fairly elaborate finial on the top. You can have a fairly elaborate finial or icicle on the bottom. So you can do a lot of different things just with that basic box. Once again, it's just a fairly round lid, a fairly round bottom, a nice, reasonable fit. Yes, question?
When you did one like that where you had a finial on the outside and the inside, what thickness did you leave the lid for the application of the finial?
This lid is, the question is, if you have a finial on the top or a finial on the bottom, how thick did I leave the lid? It's about 1/8 of an inch. And I actually, that was kind of what I was shooting for, too. So, sometimes things work out the way they're supposed to. Yes?
This is a stupid question.
There's no stupid questions.
In this one, for basically a beginning tournament, when you say in grain boxes, it's only, I mean, I'm thinking it's simplified, it's just the orientation in which you are turning.
Question is, when you talk about end grain lidded boxes, is it just the grain orientation? Yes. The grain is running just like this. And every now and then you get the question, well, if you're turning a box, does it have to be an end grain box? The answer is no. You can turn a box this way as well. Yeah. I mean, with an end grain lidded box, there's more stability to the wood in terms of keeping it round. But if, as long as it's a small box, it shouldn't go out of shape that much. But good question. If you want to advance a little bit beyond just a basic box, let's say you want to turn some beads. I mean, this, in my opinion, looks a whole lot nicer than the one that went around. But that's just because I like it. That doesn't mean that other people would like the same thing. Once again, it's got a nice lid that comes right off, but it also goes right back on. It doesn't have to be a box that you've got to rip apart. Please don't drop these. Whereas the first two were just basic pieces of cherry, this is a piece of hickory. Now this does not have the tight fit. Well, it has a fairly good fit. This, I believe, is the fit that you should be looking for if you're trying to sell these things. Because most people, I mean, wood turners are impressed if it pops or if it fits. People who buy boxes aren't impressed by that. They want a lid that comes off. I won't tell you what kind of fit I was looking for when I made this, but that's the kind you should be looking for if you're trying to sell boxes. And then if you want to do some texturing, you could do some beading or threading. There are a lot of other things that you can do. And with that, we're going to actually start to turn a box. What I've done is I've mounted the wood between centers. Some of you will notice there is a chuck here. My center fits inside the chuck. It's the type of center that I prefer. It's from Penn State. I think it's, I don't know, I haven't bought it in a while, but I think it's like 15 bucks or something. Sorby sells the same thing. Sorby calls it a steb center. I think Sorby charges $50 or $60 for their. Well, they're not the same thing, but they're pretty close. They're pretty close.
If you use them, they're completely.
Well, I learned to use and like the 15. Yeah, I learned to use and like the $15 one. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to turn that round, and you can use any tool that you want. I'm going to use a spindle roughing gouge. Some people will use a skew. Some people may use a bowl gouge, but we're just going to turn this round and then we'll stop then. A couple of safety tips. My speed is turned the whole way down. I don't know who used this lathe before. I don't want to turn this on and have it cranked up to 3,000 RPM. In this particular case, that's not going to be, wouldn't be a major problem because this is not a big piece of wood. But just as a matter of practice, I always turn it down. It's on, and I'll turn it up to speed. If we probably have to plug it in.
Plug it in, if I work better.
First step: plug in the lathe. Okay, we got a number. Okay, I've mounted it. I've made sure that it clears the tool rest. I've got my face guard on. I'm going to turn it up. Probably it's about 1900 right now. I want to move the tool rest a little closer to the wood. Once again, I'm going to turn it to make sure it clears. You notice when I'm cutting through, it's my body that's pushing the tool. So now we have it round. We have it round. I want to put a tenon on each end, and there are different tools that you can use to do that. You can use a parting tool or you can use a bidan. Now, a lot of beginner turners spend a lot of time with calipers, trying to check to see how long the tenon should be, how thick it should be. They make no-go, no-go gauges. They do a lot of different things. I will tell you, this bidan is 3/8 of an inch wide. The jaws on my chuck are 1/2 inch deep. So if I line that bidan up with the end of the wood and go straight in, I know I have an extra 1/8 of an inch to play with, and it fits perfect. Standard parting gauge, I think parting tool is about 1/8 of an inch wide. So if you use 3 widths of a parting tool, you're there. You really don't need to measure this. I mean, you've got a measurement right here. In terms of measuring the diameter of the tenon, this piece right here that my center is in, if I turn the wood down so that it's parallel to that, it will fit perfectly. I don't need to put calipers in there or a no-go gauge, and then I just duplicate the thing on the other side. So we'll put a tenon on each end. The other thing you have to make sure is you need to know the profile of your jaws. Is it a straight jawed chuck? Is it a dovetail? My jaws are straight. If you're using a Vic mark or something, your profile is going to be different than mine, but that's how long it takes to cut an accurate tenon. At least I hope that's how long it took to cut an accurate tenon. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take it out and we're going to mount this in the chuck. It's always nice when things fit the way you tell people they're going to. But I am going to pull the tailstock up. And what I have found is if you're going to pull the tailstock up, pull it up, lock it in place, and then bring this up to tighten it down. Because if you just bring this up and slam it in place, in many cases you're not in the center where you were before. This works a little bit better. It's still running fairly true, so that's close enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to mark where we want the top to be. And we want the top to be right about there. In terms of design considerations, let me tell you what the standards are, and then let me tell you what you should do. Rule of thumb, what looks best to people, the top is 1/3 of the total box, or the top is 2/5 of the total box, or the top is 1 to 1.6 of the total box, depending upon who you listen to. And for the most part, if you follow one of those suggestions, it does look pretty good. But having said that, if you look through Chris Stotts' book, you'll see a lot of boxes that don't fit those guidelines. So now that you know what the guidelines are, you can either adhere to them or you can ignore them. Do whatever you want, but that's all we're going to talk about in terms of design. So we're going to bring this up, and we're just going to cut this off. Now, I've seen people do this different ways. I've actually seen people take that square blank and push it through a bandsaw beforehand. And, well, it worked great. I saw a guy, oh yeah, Harvey Meyer does it that way. And he'll put those two pieces in there and he'll turn them around. He'll turn the tenons on, he'll take it off, and it comes right apart. The friction holds them together. And his rationale is you leave a very, very small kerf, so the grain is lined up that much more. I use a parting tool. It works well for me. Want to extend my mark the whole way around it. So I'm going to go about half of the way through with the regular parting tool, and then I'm going to go this way, and I'm not going to go the whole way. There's no reason to see if you can turn to within a 30-second and have something flying off the lathe. There's no need to do that. If you get it that close, you can just snap this off when you're done anyway. So. That's lined up right with the black frame, so it's hard to see. I think we got a little bit ways to go. I've also seen people bring little saws and get it most of the way and then finish with a saw.
Like a hacksaw?
Any saw that'll fit in that curve.
Well, you have fairly coarse teeth. You'll be there forever with a 32-tooth hacksaw.
Of course, theoretically, you're only cutting through less than 1/4 of an inch. So since this is already in the lathe, we're going to make this the lid. So what we're going to start with, I want to clean up this edge just a little bit because that's going to be the final edge of the box. And you, once again, can use whatever tool works for you. You can either use a skew. I prefer a spindle gouge. That's just what I prefer to use. But we're going to clean that up and then we're going to start hollowing it. And I think we need to, it moved whenever we broke it off. And that looks a little bit better. You also want to concave it just a little bit so that when this fits the bottom or the base, you don't have a big clunky thing like this. You've got just the lip showing. Now we want to hollow this. And there are a number of different ways you can do this. I have seen people use Forstner bits. I don't particularly care to use a Forstner bit on end grain, but some people think it's okay. And I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying there are different ways to do it. You can use a hollowing tool if you want. Do whatever you want. I use a spindle gouge. And it's fairly easy. You want to line it up straight in and just crank it out at 45 degrees. Now when you do this, you need to kind of have a sense as to what the outside is going to look like as well. Because if your outside is going to be flared in, you don't want to cut too much out. And basically, I'm just going to dome it on the inside. You also have to pay attention to how deep you're going, because there is an end to that. You can't just go indefinitely. Now's a good time to start deciding how thick do you want that to be. For something like this, 3/16 inches is a pretty good thickness. If you're going to put beads on it, this may have to be a different thickness, but once again, you have to know what the outside's going to look like before you can turn the inside. You heard the screaming or the screeching. That's because the further the tool goes in, the further out it is from the tool rest. There are a couple of different ways you can fix that. One is to try to get the tool rest closer. That will still clear the work. You can use a conventional tool rest, or you can use a tool rest that is designed for boxes. And you can actually stick that right down the inside of the body, which we will do when we get to that part. But let's bring this out, get closer to where we are, and then we'll go in and we'll clean it up with a scraper.
What's your RPMs, your friend?
About 1,500, 1,800. The question was, what are the RPMs that I'm turning? 1,500, 1,800. Did you notice how the screeching disappeared? That's because the tool rest is closer to the wood. There's a gouge in there, don't worry about it. We're just hogging the wood out right now. Now we're going to go in with a scraper and clean that all up. This is what is called a negative rake scraper. It's ground on both the top and the bottom. A traditional scraper just has a flat on the top. This has a bevel on the top. If you're using a traditional scraper, you're going in with the handle up. If you're using a negative rake scraper, for the most part, you're going straight in. And you're going in so that it's cutting at center. We're going to go in and we're just going to come right around and clean that up. And first of all, we're going to check the depth. We've got our fancy depth finder, and we still have a little bit of room. See, we got a lot of the tear out. There's still a little bit more, so we're going to go clean that out. But before we do that, so that we have a nice fit, I want the inside of the lid to be parallel with the bed of the lathe. I want it to be 90 degrees to this plane. So we're going to just go in with a square scraper. I'm going to line it up with the bed of the ways, or I'm sorry, the ways of the lathe, and I'm just going to go straight in.
So is the tool rest is also perpendicular to the bed of the lathe?
Yes. Well, it doesn't have to be, but it doesn't have to be, but it could be.
Okay.
as long as it's supporting the tool. The tool, because it's a negative rake scraper, it's going in, should be fairly horizontal, should be fairly horizontal, and all I'm going to do is just, I've got it lined up with this line right here, and I'm just going to go straight in. I want to go in at least about 3/16 of an inch. And if you want to check that, you can just use, a set of calipers. All you do is you put it in, you line it up with the outside, and you see if it, and that's pretty close. So now all I've got to do is just clean that tear out, and we'll be all set to go with this one, with the lid. If I can find my scraper. Here we go. Just like my shop. Yeah. Just like my shop. Can't find anything. Okay, the tear out is gone. I've got a clean lip. Now this would be the time that we would sand. We're not going to waste any time doing that. After we sand, depending upon what you're going to finish it with, you may finish it now also. We're not going to spend the time to do that, but that gives you an idea as to how that would work. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on the outside of the lid. So the question becomes, how are we going to check this up so we can work on the outside of the lid? And we're going to use what is called a jam chuck, something that we're going to make. All this is a scrap of wood. Doesn't matter what kind it is, just a scrap of wood that'll fit in here. And what we want to do is we want to cut a tenon on this end right here so that this will jam onto there. You can see it's already, I kind of know by doing this what the diameter is supposed to be, because there's a line there, a burnish line from rubbing this like that. So we're going to go with that. We'll turn it down a little more. Now the thing to keep in mind is if you're trying to take a 16th off, you're really only taking a 32nd off, because it's a 32nd on this side, which automatically is a 32nd on that side, so it's a 16th total. Worst case scenario, you turn it too small. Well, we'll talk about how to fix that too. You can use any tool you want. I'll use a Badan. And since I want it to mount tight against this here, this tenon was too long, so I just took some of it off because I want it. Okay, now that is a tiny bit loose. Okay? That's not the end of the world. We can fix that. You can either just turn that away and turn another tenon. You can stick a piece of paper in it, which is what we're going to do it. That's good enough. If it's real loose, you can even tape it on. I've seen people do that. There's ways to do this. I want to bring the tailstock up for support, but I don't want this tip in there. So I'm just going to use a flat. We're just going to put a point in that's flat on the top. And one thing I forgot to do is measure the depth. And rather than guess, we're going to measure it. Okay. So I can see my top is right up. I've only got about, I don't have a whole lot of room left on the center. Remember, the inside domes like that. So even though I don't have very much room left on the center to the tenon, I still have some room left on the side, which means my tenon, instead of turning it away, is going to become part of my top. You can do it either way. In this case, I can't do it either way. It's going to become part of the top. So we'll put that back together. We'll bring this up, stop it a little bit, and then crank it in. And that's just for security. If it's tight enough, you can turn it without that in place, but I prefer to have it there. You can turn that however you want. I prefer, once again, using a spindle gouge. Don't be afraid to sharpen your tools. It does make a huge difference. Get the tool rest a little closer to the wood. This is about the time you would start to sand the top. If you're going to texture it, you put the texture. I would like to leave a little bead on the top. I'm going to straighten up the side a little bit, clean the bead up, and we'll take it off.
Steve, are you using your relationship between the lid and your waste block to maintain, to know where your thickness is?
The question is, am I using a relationship between the lid and the waste block to know what my thickness is? No, but you could do it that way. I know when I put this on, the top was a little thick, about 3/16. I know I can take a fair amount off before, well, to keep from going through. And right about now is when I would sand this up to clean it. I still want to take a little bit off, get that little spur point out of there. But no, it's a good question. And it should stay in place without that, with the paper in there. We just have a little bit, and we're just going to take some light cuts, so it shouldn't come off. And you'll notice that when I made those cuts, I was pushing against the headstock like that. I was not pushing this way. That could potentially rip it off. This still has some tool marks on, but they're easily sanded out. So for the most part, we're now done with the lid. And if you have it there, so that's the lid. So the next thing we need to do is to come up with a base to match that. And these things you can save and reuse time and time again. You can get a lot of boxes out of these things. So any little scrap of wood that you've got, just save it. You find something to use it for. Oh, it's always nice when both tenons fit in the chuck. Okay, that's running very smooth. So once again, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to clean up the edge, and then we're going to start hollowing. Now one thing, and I've already done this once tonight, a lot of new turners have a problem with this, and some of us intermediate turners have the same problem. You present the spindle gouge and all of a sudden it goes swirling down the side. In many cases what you've done is you've gone in like this. Really you should be pointing the tool towards the cut. And when you get here you can just kind of swing it around. And we'll see if that works. Okay, we've got the edge cleaned up. Now once again we're going to go in and hollow it the same way we hollowed the lid. And once again, just as a reminder, you can use a drill, you can use a hollowing tool, you can use whatever you want, but I'm going to use a spindle gouge. Once again, it should be presented at about horizontal. Go in at any angle. For those of you who have ever seen an old spoon drill bit that electricians used to use, the profile on a spoon drill bit is basically the same as a spindle gouge. That's why it works. It's not that complex. Now with the top, when we hollowed, we could really come out however far we wanted. It really didn't matter as long as we didn't come the whole way out the side. This does matter because you got to keep a lip on the inside for that lid to fit on. You can't come out to here and turn away your whole lip and wonder why the lid won't fit on there. You've got to set that depth or that thickness. So what we've got a set of dividers. All we're going to do is open them up to the inside of that lid. So what that means is I can't hollow any more than that. And so I want to mark that. Easiest way to do this, I want to clean that up just a little bit more. Give me a flat surface. I've got the tool rest at 45 degrees. I'm just going to kind of hold this. I want to drop it down a little bit more. I'm going to touch the one closest to me. I'm not going to touch the one furthest away from me. As Jimmy Clues would say, if you do that, it'll jump out of your hand and go through your neck. I don't know if that'll happen or not, but we're not going to find out tonight. You're not resting it on the tool rest, you're holding it in your hand. So as you mark that, you're kind of lining this up to see that it tracks in the same mark. So let's see how that works. So what that means is I have to leave enough room inside that to form a wall. So if I want to keep it the same width as that, or the same thickness as that, about there is where I'm going to turn to, or hollow to. Does that make sense? Okay. Because if I go past that, I don't have any room left for my lip. Huh?
Mark it.
Mark it. Well, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this down also. But I want to hollow a little bit more out before I take down. So,
Is there a reason you use the dividers versus making a point using a pencil?
the dividers are, the question is there a reason I use the dividers instead of just marking with a pencil? The dividers are just easier for me. You could certainly use a pencil. The question is, where do you put the pencil?
Well, I thought once you did it, you kind of made a dot there, and I figured then you could put the pencil and
Well, actually what I did is I held the divider up and I was kind of lining up the other side at the same time, and then I pushed this side in so that the other side, I was actually kind of lining up two dots, one on each side. But because they're a dot, they're on a circle going around, then you know it's lined up. So we're going to take a little out.
The divider's a little bit more accurate than the pencil point breaks off.
Good.
Okay, now that I'm not finished hollowing, but now that I've relieved some of the stress that's in the wood in that area, I'm going to fit the lid. And what we're going to do, if I fit the right lid, where is the lid? Right here. From the outside, I've got to turn down so that this will slide over the top of that. You can do it one of two ways. You can either turn it the whole way until you think it's right, or you can turn a little bit at a time. We're going to turn a little bit at a time for obvious reasons. Question becomes, how much lip do you want? Maybe 3/16 of an inch, that's up to you. Which tool do you use? Use whichever tool you want. I'm going to use a Badan, but I'm going to turn it at an angle, and I'm going to turn it right down to that line to start with, so that the line is sloped away from that angle. So if we accidentally overshoot it, there's still plenty of wood left to play with. You can see how it peeled, where it peeled away at the very end. That's where the divider went in. So let's see how it fits. It fits right over where the divider cut in. So the divider was, Jack said it's a pretty accurate way to do it. It was pretty darn accurate. So now the question becomes, how do I get this to fit the rest of the way? Well, you've got to take more wood off. How do I get it fit so that it's not too tight? And remember with the lid, this is the inside of the lid. Straight sides. What we're going to do with the base, it's going to go up and down. So that when that comes in, it's going to be tight against, now those are accentuated. I want it to be tight against that little hill that we're going to leave. Little crown, there you go. Any questions on that? Because that is the key to making a successful fit. Now, what do you do if you go through all this and lo and behold, you slap it on and it falls off? Well, you've actually built a little extra wood into the project. You just start over right in the center. Now the grain might not line up perfectly, but you can still get a good fit, and depending upon what grain you use, it may not line up at all anyway, so it doesn't matter. So you've allowed yourself a little bit of room for error. So let's work on that a little bit. And what I'm trying to do is rub it and burnish it, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's a burnish mark that comes out to about here. So I know that's my high spot right there. So if I don't touch that high spot and I go behind it, I should be okay. But I'm not going to go behind it by much. We're going to take a little bit off at a time. Yes?
Do you ever burnish it under power, under rotation?
I've seen people do that. I personally don't feel, the question is, do I ever burnish it under power? I've seen people do that. I personally don't feel comfortable with it, but I'm not saying you can't do it that way. Mike Peace mentioned that sometimes the lid is too tight if you finish where you turned it. Well, sometimes that works both ways. If it's too loose, you can tighten it up by finishing it. So there are ways to make this work. Doesn't fit yet, but we're in no hurry.
Well, if you really screw up, you cut a little groove and put an O-ring.
Yeah, Jack says you could cut a ring and cut a groove and put an O-ring. I have to admit, I've never seen anybody do that, but
Makes it airtight.
makes it airtight, yes. Okay, now that's probably a little tighter than what we want, but that's okay, because what we're going to do now is just straighten this up the whole way down, and then we'll go back and then finish up the hollowing. Now, the question also becomes, what do you do with this groove? There are some people who think you can make that so inconspicuous that no one's ever even going to see it and they're going to think it's one piece of wood. That's not going to happen. At least I don't think it's going to happen. So what the Raffins and the Stotzes and the Pieces and all the other famous turners tell you is celebrate the joint. So all we're going to do is just cut a little groove in there, and we're going to be careful when we cut the groove that we're not going to pop this off. You could burn it with the Formica. You could do whatever you want. Okay. And once again, if you're going to finish it, now's a good time to sand it. Now we got to get the lid off. And actually, this is a good time to use a skew. This is one of the few times that I use a skew. That will actually, well, yeah, either a paint can opener or a lid, there, it popped right. Do you see it pop? Not the whole way, but it loosened it up. And once again, this is intentionally tight while we do that. This is not intended to be the final fit. We're going to do that in just a minute.
Some folks use that for the jam fit to do the top.
They do, yes. You can do that. Get this out of the way.
Now, I think Dan used one of those rubber things at one time.
One of those rubber things?
No, he used a, no, remember it was like a belt type thing you used?
Oh, well,
Oh,
band clamp or band strip.
you get ready to catch it.
Not with the skew up there.
Not with the skew there?
Tap it with the handle of the skew. Try it this way.
Jam locks off the car.
No, we're going to use that. This way, if it doesn't work out, I can blame Dan.
Or do you knock it loose like that? See, it's coming out there now. But yeah, you can go ahead and jam it in there if you want.
Uh-huh.
You got two skews?
I'll hold the spindle off for you there.
Here, we're getting it. There. And actually, believe it or not, I have seen some wood turners pass that off as their final fit and say, see how tight that is? Right. So now we'll just clean that up a little bit. So the question is, was our little bit too much, or was it the right amount? And I think it's fine. Now, there are a couple of scuff marks from where we beat it up a little bit with the skew, but that's why they have sandpaper. And we'll just clean that up. So, yeah, that's the type of fit we want. It fits on tight, but it ain't going to fall off either. So now we can go back to hollowing it.
Will it not be too tight when you put a finish on it?
The question is, will it be too tight if you put a finish on it? If you put a heavy finish on it, it will. But you know what? They've got a special tool to fix that. Right there. We're going to use a slightly bigger tool. Now, the question becomes, how deep do you want the box to be? You know, what are you going to use it for? It's been my experience that you really don't need a box much deeper than that. Most of them are ornamental. People may use them for some things, but they don't use them for a whole lot of things. If you just look at that, we've still got a center nub in the bottom. We've got some torn grain. I'm not concerned about that. I would like to get that center out with this tool. Then we'll go in with a scraper and clean that up, and we'll call that the bottom of the box.
We could figure out what to do with them, we could probably market them better.
Well, people, and that's a good point. People look at boxes and they think they look really neat, and the tops fit, and they're really nice. I've never tried to sell one, but I've told they don't sell very well. So, I don't know. So.
They ought to sell good in the drugstore next to the condom.
Okay, I've taken that nub out with this, and I'm going to go in with the scraper and just clean it up a little bit.
Hey, you sell them in the jewelry store, but the jewelry store on the line ring and stuff. Make a good presentation box for engagement ring.
You could forget all that scraping and sanding in there, just fill it with foam, cut a slit in it so you can put a ring in.
You could do that.
And get Jane Burke to show you how to charge $175
Yeah, for those of you romantic people, if you're going to ever get engaged again, this is a good thing to put a ring in. But you make sure the lid will come off, though. I just have a little nib on the bottom. We're going to nibble away at it. Whoops, we're going to. Yeah, okay. For some reason, we're going in reverse.
Doesn't cut nearly so well that way. That was cut on the other side.
Okay, now is the time that you would sand, and there's a little nib in there, but I'm not going to worry about getting it out. You would sand it, depending upon what you're finishing it with, you would finish it, but you've also got to part off the bottom. Now, what you want to do, and there's a couple of different ways to do this, there's a lot of extra wood here, so we got our choice of things to do. So we got all this wood before we run out of, before we hit air on the other side. And it's always good to have too much than too little. So all we got to do is keep this in mind. Now there are a couple of ways you can do this. With this much wood, you can just part it off here. There's plenty of room. Or you can prepare another jam chuck and jam it from the other side, and I think we have time to do that. So let's do that. I don't think you can see them, but I have 1, 2, 3, 4 marked on these jam chucks to coincide with the jaws. So whenever I put them in, they're they're always in the same place in relationship to the jaws. Okay. Now we know that's a little too big, so we're going to take some off of that. And this is not the same jam chuck we used before. This is a little different, just a different size. Okay. Okay. Well, that's why they got paper. This looks like a two-sheeter. So. I don't think we have to use our blue tape, so we're good to go there. We're going to bring the tailstock up for support. So the bottom is right there, so we got plenty of wood to play with. So let's just get rid of a bunch of it to start with.
And now you've lost your 1/3, 2/3 relationship between the top and bottom.
Well, I gave you two choices, either follow them or just ignore them. We're ignoring them now. Now, I still want to keep that there, but I want to give me a clean thing to rest it against. Okay. So all we're going to do is just clean that up. And I like to like to use a spindle gouge. Now what I've done with the bottom is I've kind of rounded a little bit so that when you sit it down you get a little shadow line on it, so you get some lift off the table. But now I'm going in and I'm concaving it out so that it doesn't rock on the bottom. It's going to rest on a flat ring, and the ring is about here. And as I concave it out, I've got to remember where that line is, where the bottom. So, because in concaving it, and I've got a good concave in it right now, so if I go straight across, I'll be good. Now, if you can put rings on the bottom, circles on the bottom. I think one of the ones that I passed around had circles on the bottom. Now would be the time to do it. Now that it's nice and clean. You could have put circles on the inside of the lid. You could have put circles on the top of the lid. You could do whatever you want. So we're gonna part this off now. Ooh, got a little chatter work around the outside.
You planted that, didn't you?
I planned, well, no, we'll clean that up. Huh?
Put a little V on each side and call it a detail.
Well, you could do that. Yeah. There's a little knot right there. And I really don't want to get too much closer to that. I saw it on the inside when I hollowed it out. And sometimes when you cut into knots, they have a tendency to go flying. I didn't want to get this far and have it go flying. So, huh?
That's for suction relief.
Suction relief. So if the lid doesn't fit, that's why. It's got a hole in the
The
bottom.
whole water is dark, so price just went up.
Well, you can't see through it, so that's good. So that's our box. Where you want it, up there? Any questions? Got 5 minutes left. How about that?
Hey, Stu,
Yes.
I've got a piece of walnut, I think it was where they box a heart in a veneer mill.
Mm-hmm.
It's about 4 or 5 inches square with a pith running through it. Would that be a tremendous problem in something like this?
Question is, if you got a piece of wood with the pith running right through it, would that be a problem? I've turned a lot of little vases with the pith running right through it, and what I typically do is I saturate that with CA glue to keep it all together. If it's dry, I would think it might be okay. If it's still wet, I'm not so sure. One thing I will tell you, in terms of grain match, with something like cherry, you saw how much we took off when we cut the groove, but the grain still matches fairly well. I turned a box last night that was a maple box with a big black streak running down the side, and I thought that would look really great. Well, the streak started out real wide at the top and tapered down. I only took 1/8 of an inch out there, but there's a big jump. The taper comes down and then jumps in and goes down. So if the coloration is vertical, it's okay. If it starts going down like that, it's a problem. If it's spalted and it's all over the place, that's not a problem. But you want to avoid that singular dark thing coming down at an angle, because it's just going to give you problems. Yeah. So it doesn't match the 1/3 rule, but I think it still looks pretty good. And that's why you just throw the rules out the window.
Okay, for the surprise drawing